Hi everyone, this is Karen with Solar Academy. Again, we have Greg Sellers of Stable Solar. Again, this week we're going to talk about um, before you buy a home with solar, what are the things you got to pay attention to? Greg, since you're in the O&M business for solar
hmm
homeowners, helping them with their solar issues, this is something I'm
Yeah,
sure you encounter quite a
we
bit.
see it all the time, Karam.
Right.
We moved about 5 years ago, and we had solar on our old home, and I really missed not having it. We're like the folks who don't
Take care of them.
take care of their own stuff, but eventually we're going to get solar on our house. But when we sold it, I made sure that I told the new owners all about the solar installation. And of course, I was very involved. That was a very easy thing to do. We get calls, though, all the time from people who don't have any idea. They got the solar. They were told that it works, and they just take it at that, and they get their bill every month, and it's pretty low. Half the time, they don't even know about true ups, which is a whole mystery that they find out about the hard way about 6 months after they buy it. And then a lot of times, though, they won't find out and realize that there's anything about the system that they need to worry about until it goes offline, and then they get a big bill, or they just see a big difference. And so there's a few things that we advise that folks keep in mind. If you're looking at a house and it has solar on it and you're thinking about buying it, first of all, good for you. You should be doing that. It's a positive. But a couple of things to keep in mind. The easy first one is to ask or find out who the installer was and how old the system is. And with that, you should try to reach out to the installer and see how receptive they are. And if they're responsive, if they have servicing, are there any warranties still on? What are those? How do they transfer? The second thing is to keep in mind that make sure that there's monitoring on the system that you can actually track, and then you have to make sure that's transferred to your name. We get a lot of folks, some of the big microinverters now, companies, now they're transferring, but they're charging it in some places, and there's a variety of issues that you have to deal with in that transfer. And if it's not done in the course of the sale of the house, then a lot of times you're stuck trying to reach out to the old homeowner after they've moved, and it
Right.
just leaves
That
you.
I did that too
Um,
with my old home when we sold it. I
mhm.
had to help the new buyer with a number of things like that,
Yeah.
especially to transfer the dashboard. It was
Yep.
a Solar Edge in my case. So,
Yeah.
and I kind of remember maybe even involving the installer, or does that have
hmm
to, does the installer have to be involved in that transfer process, or can it be done
If
without? I
yeah,
mean, we're
if
talking about the major 3, 4, 5 brands of inverters now:
right.
Enphase, Solar
hmm
Edge, Fronius, SMA,
Yeah.
whatever else, probably, right?
Yeah, and there's a little bit different processes.
Mhm.
Enphase recently changed their process, so it
Mhm.
is both better and worse. There's a little more cost involved, but they've tried to make it a little more seamless, and so is SolarEdge. But
Mhm.
it's but it's something that has to be done because their constraints, a lot of them are legal. They're constrained in terms of sharing data, and so you have to go through a process to legally request it and make sure you do it the right way. So there's a transfer form and things you have to go through. But that's the second thing to get recorded. The reason you want to get an installer involved, if they're available, is a good installer will not only make sure you have the original installation has monitoring, but also that they will oftentimes be tracking it themselves. If you
Sure.
don't, and we're finding one of the big things that we do at Stable Solar is track monitoring on behalf of our customers. So we have hundreds of customers who we track every month and just make sure their systems are doing what they're supposed to be doing. It doesn't take away that power from the homeowner. In fact, we strongly encourage homeowners to reach out, but it's something that you have to keep in mind and do diligently, and homeowners appreciate it. And then we reach out as a good installer will and say, hey, we noticed something different, and we can give them some thoughts on how to do that. So those are the two main things. The last thing to do is, if you can, is just as you do with the rest of the home, a good friend of ours and a colleague of mine just is selling their home in Arizona. And he just went through a whole process with the inspection, and they do a whole house inspection, and there's a few items, and you got to fix this and this. I'm always amazed that they don't do as good an inspection with solar as they do with the rest of the house. So either incorporate the inspection process. A lot of companies out there, we do them, and a lot of other companies do. An installer can go out, take photos of the system, upload those. There's some very simple ways to do that. And then we have different technicians who look at the system remotely from the photos and can tell pretty quickly if there's any issues that ought to be dealt with. So it's a pretty straightforward process, but those are a few things to keep in mind. Then the last one is just to gauge the performance, make sure it's performing as expected. And then actually the last thing is to make sure that you get all of the paperwork from the system. It'll tell you what the components are. It'll tell you what the warranties are. It'll tell you when it was installed. All of that, because 5, 7, 8 years from now, when you have to call somebody to get it serviced, they're going to ask you things like, well, what kind of inverter do you have? When was it installed? What kind of panels do you have? How big are they? And you need to know all of that when you're dealing with that. So those are a few things to keep in mind when you're getting it installed. I guess if the only other thing I would think of, and of course we keep dealing with issues, so I keep thinking of them as we're talking, is as part of the inspection, you'll get the roof inspected, and you'll know how old the roof is. And general advice, if the roof certainly is, even if it has a 25-year warranty, if it's over 15, close to 20 years old, it's something you need to be aware of, because removing and replacing the solar installation, which you and I should talk about, we have talked about in the past, is not an inexpensive prospect. So you just need to keep that in mind. But the main thing is just to make sure that you have all the information you need, that the system's doing as what it's expected, and that you can track performance. And if you do those things, you're going to have a great system for many years to come.
Thank you for this information, Greg.
Sure.